Are you a manual therapist ready to expand your clinical reach and deepen your effectiveness? Upledger Craniosacral Therapy addresses deep restrictions, supports neurological and fascial systems, and enhances whole body function by working with the body's natural healing processes. For over 40 years, Upledger Institute International has led the field of craniosacral therapy, offering an approach that integrates seamlessly into any manual therapy practice and supports common to complex and chronic conditions. Find a class near you at upledger.com/courses or call 800-233-5880 extension 2 and begin your craniosacral therapy training for as little as $100 a month. Stop straining your hands and start getting your clients underfoot. At the Center for Barefoot Massage, we teach you to use gravity and physics to deliver effortless, deep myofascial work. Through our fasci-ashi approach of myofascial ashiatsu, barefoot mat work, and stretch therapy, you'll learn evidence-based techniques to resolve persistent pain. Worried about your size difference in relation to clients? Our innovative Ashi strap supports therapists of all builds to vary pressure with precision. The future of massage is afoot. Discover our upcoming CE classes at centerforbarefootmassage.com.
The scapula. I mean, look at this thing. It is an incredible structure, wildly odd in its appearance, yet perfectly poised to do so many things. I know, the scapula doesn't do anything, but it gets pushed and pulled in nearly every direction possible from an impressive number of determined muscles, acting like a gathering of octopuses fighting over a clam. The clam is the prize, and the scapula, I mean, if I was a muscle, I would fight to own it too. The thing is just cool. It is its own unique entity in our perplexing anatomy, mimicked only by its counterpart on the other side of the spine. And it often finds itself in the middle of a here or there, this or that scenario, stuck in a tug-of-war situation. Kind of like my heart sometimes, to be honest. So today, I'm shining a spotlight on this oddly shaped anatomical anomaly, the scapula, not my heart. The 17 or so muscles that move it, its role in mobility and stability, and most notably, the incredible bond it has created between the trapezius muscle and the serratus anterior muscle. I mean, it has truly brought together joints and tissues and motions that seemingly live on opposite sides of the fence. But this interplay between the traps and the serratus anterior, a relationship known in kinesiology as force coupling, is something I feel we could all learn from, me specifically. To forcibly couple two sides that can't seem to settle on which direction to take, seriously, it's an art form. The scapula is technically part of the shoulder complex. Aptly named, I might add. This combination of four joints is what allows the shoulder to complexly do all the things that a shoulder can do. Throw a ball, hug a loved one, reach overhead to grab your favorite coffee mug that someone has placed on the top shelf forgetting that you are short. The mobility of the shoulder exceeds all the other joints in the body, and the scapula is the very reason for this feat, specifically the scapulothoracic joint. Of the four joints that define the shoulder, this is the one that creates all the magic. Knowing these four joints is key though, so let's look at them. First, the glenohumeral joint, where the humerus meets the glenoid fossa of the scapula. Classic ball and socket joint. This is what most people think of when they think of the shoulder. Then there's the acromioclavicular joint, where the lateral end of the clavicle meets up with the acromion process, that bump at the lateral end of the spine of the scapula, kind of on the top of your shoulder. This one has a tendency to separate, not fun. Then there's the sternoclavicular joint, where the medial aspect of the clavicle meets up with the sternum. Pretty solid structure situated right at the base of your throat. And then there's the scapulothoracic joint, the joint that describes the relationship of the scapula with the rib cage. It has been made clear that this is not a true joint, but in my humble opinion, this is the truest of joints. depending on your definition of true. Before we dive into this bad boy, it's important to know that there are set definitions of joints. 3 basic categories that a joint might fall under according to the structure of the joint itself. In very brief terms, there are those that are bound by ligaments, a joint capsule, and synovial fluid, like the knee or the wrist. Those that are bound by cartilage, like where the ribs articulate with the vertebrae. And then there are those connected with tough, fibrous connective tissue, like the sutures in the skull. But the scapulothoracic joint defies these confinements. It's an ever-evolving relationship between the scapula and the ribs. It is held together with a collection of muscles and their respective tendons that span out like a spiral galaxy in every direction. It is as freely moving as a joint gets. So for me, this is a joint reaching its full potential, the truest version of itself, if you will. The scapula, you see, is a floating bone, floating over the rib cage like Luke Skywalker's hovercraft. It slides out and away from the spine, known as protraction or abduction in certain circles, in towards the spine, known as retraction or adduction in those same circles, and then it does this unique rotation thing, not like how we rotate our palms up or down, creating supination or pronation, but more like swinging upward or downward, like turning the water on or off on a water spigot. Those motions are called upward rotation when the inferior angle of the scapula swings out and up, and downward rotation, so the opposite, when the inferior angle swings back down and in. So in practical terms, as the arm swings out into abduction or forward into flexion, if the scapula wasn't hovercrafting and rotating its way around the ribs, we would only be able to reach up to about 90 or maybe 100 degrees. The ball and socket at the glenohumeral joint only goes so far. The upward swing of the scapula is what brings that full reach into reality. The shoulder would be a very different thing altogether if it weren't for this joint. Actually, come to think of it, it would behave a lot more like the hip, one joint, a ball and socket joint, with the socket being fixed in place. Maybe it's funnier to think about what the hip would look like if the acetabulum, or the socket part of the joint, was solely on the ischium, or the lowermost bone of the pelvis, and the ischium was then a floating bone. It kind of breaks the brain to think about it, but this isn't the case though, and thankfully we have stability in our hips. My point is, if there were no scapulothoracic joint, there would be no reaching overhead for a favorite coffee cup, no throwing of a baseball with a projectile force of 100 miles an hour over home plate impressing a stadium of fans, and definitely no hugging in the way that a full, deep hug can be when it's with someone you love. It is a beautiful thing what this joint enables us to do, and a lot of things had to come together to make this happen. And yes, there are those 17 muscles clamoring over the scapula, sometimes 16, sometimes 18 or 19, again, depending on your source. I won't bore you with that list today, but this is also where the symbiotic relationship between the broad trapezius and the hidden serratus anterior shines. These two muscles not only create a spectacular mechanism, but it is phenomenally important for us to understand when it comes to assessing and treating shoulder pain, back pain, and neck pain. The trapezius, to start off with, has 3 distinct groups of muscle fibers moving somewhat kind of independently. Among other actions, the upper fibers elevate and upwardly rotate the scapula, the middle fibers retract it, and the lower fibers depress it, but also upwardly rotate it. Meaning the upper fibers and lower fibers are both antagonists against each other and synergists to each other at the same time. So there's that. The serratus anterior, on the other hand, is mostly out of view, tucked beneath the scapula between the subscapularis and the rib cage. You can see it on people who are lean or super buff, those finger-like slips of muscle fanning out from underneath the armpit, dovetailing with the external obliques to create that cool serrated edge. Mostly, it protracts the scapula, holds its medial border flat against the rib cage to stabilize it, and, critically and maybe not shockingly, upwardly rotates it. Take a minute to sit with this. Upward rotation of the scapula requires the upper traps to pull on the lateral portion of the spine of the scapula, the lower traps to pull down on the medial aspect of the spine of the scapula, and the serratus anterior to pull the inferior angle forward and up along the rib cage. 3 separate forces, 3 different directions, 1 beautifully coordinated result. The glenoid fossa tips upward so the arm can rise overhead without the greater tubercle of the humerus slamming into the underside of the acromion. This is forced coupling, and this is the shoulder giving us incredible mobility. The reason this matters clinically, and it matters enormously, is that when any of these 3 players stops doing their job, the whole system compensates. And compensation in the shoulder is complicated. Impingements, rotator cuff strains, thoracic outlet irritation, neck pain that seems to have no origin, a lot of these trace back to a scapula that isn't rotating properly, and a scapula that isn't rotating properly almost always involves the serratus anterior. Serratus weakness specifically tends to produce something called scapular winging, where the medial border lifts away from the rib cage like a wing. It looks dramatic when it's severe, and it looks like a subtle postural asymmetry when it's not. In both cases, the scapula is no longer able to track properly along the thorax, which means every overhead movement becomes a negotiation between mobility and structural tolerance. And the traps, the rotator cuff, the rhomboids, and the levator scapula all end up doing load management that they were never meant to do. This is how overuse injuries are born. Not from one catastrophic moment, but from 1,000 small moments of the wrong muscles being asked to cover for the right ones. What makes the serratus anterior particularly interesting from a treatment standpoint is how quietly it becomes problematic and how easily its role in upward rotation gets missed. This muscle is exclusively innervated by the long thoracic nerve, a nerve with an unusually long and exposed course down the lateral thorax. So stretch it, compress it, or irritate it in any number of ways, sleeping on your side with your arm over your head, repetitive overhead work, even a heavy backpack assigned to one shoulder for too long, and the serratus goes quiet. Not painful necessarily, just sort of offline. And a muscle that isn't in pain is a muscle that rarely gets investigated. So clients come in with shoulder pain, neck tension, or mid-back fatigue, and the serratus stays unchecked. It's the easiest thing to do as a massage therapist, to head straight for the pain. The trigger points and tension that have built up in the traps and the rhomboids and the levator scapula are screaming for attention. And by no means am I suggesting that they be ignored. By all means, take care of them. They're exhausted. But if we don't understand this interdependence between the traps and the serratus, if we're not acknowledging the balance needed to keep this mechanism operating smoothly, then we will continue to battle the unending cries of the upper back and neck. Which brings me back to force coupling as a concept worth borrowing for human things in general. The trapezius and the serratus anterior do not agree on direction. One pulls from behind, one pushes from the front. Their individual agendas, pursued in isolation, would be counterproductive. But the scapula, that freely floating, oddly shaped hovercraft of a bone, holds them in relationship with each other. It doesn't resolve the tension, it uses it. The opposition between these two muscles is precisely what creates the coordinated, controlled arc of motion that makes the shoulder the most mobile joint in the body. I think about my heart in this way and the decisions I often face, and I wonder if the goal was never to silence one of them. Maybe the goal is more about not picking a side, but instead finding the connection between them, to let the tension be productive, to let the push and the pull create something neither one of them could generate alone. I don't have a tidy resolution to offer. The scapula doesn't either, really. It just keeps moving, keeps hovering, keeps being held in place by 17 muscles that can't agree and somehow, together, manage to do extraordinary things. And probably that's enough.
Elevate your bodywork career with Anatomy Train's Structural Integration Certification, ATSI. Discover how to map the pattern and shape the change through inspiring lectures, hands-on body reading, and practical techniques you can use in your practice right away. Join us for ATSI Maine 2026 to 2027, where Tom Myers will personally kick off this transformative professional training. Learn more at anatomytrains.com/ATSI. Precision Neuromuscular Therapy has been teaching high-quality seminars for over 20 years across the country. Founded by Doug Nelson, PNMT uses problem-solving skills and precise treatment options to get powerful results for your clients. PNMT seminars focus on honing your assessment and palpation skills to precisely target the source of your client's pain while understanding the why behind the what. Meet us in a hands-on seminar or online in the PNMT portal and let us join you on your learning journey. Learn more at pnmt.org.